to take care of the supervisor. When Pete goes, his control panel will light up like Christmas tree. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. The Alfa Romeo 90. This has to be the rarest car we've ever had on Tweed Jacket Reviews. But is it any good? Should you care? Why? Let's find out, boy. 90. Andiamo.
It's not as if we don't have to wipe away the tears. From time to time we wouldn't lie. Here we are, we'll never be the same. And on the screens of our lives flash words of good songs that we've not yet sung. And we're not worried about the future, and we're not guilty about the past. We're pressing on together.
So welcome to a very special episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. Today we're in the Warwickshire countryside, and this is a very rare car indeed. In fact, this is the only UK registered Alfa Romeo 90 currently on the road. It's a 1985 2.5 gold cloverleaf. It's owned by Mr. Coleman, a rubbish mechanic, who's actually in the car with me today. We're actually in a social bubble, Mr. Coleman and I, which is why I'm able to travel up to the West Midlands to film this today. Also with the help of Mr. Matt Richardson for Furious Driving, who's actually in the car behind us. So thanks, James. Thames. Before we get into the absolutely fascinating history of the Alfa Romeo 90, this is probably the most interesting car I've ever filmed on the channel. Please take a moment to like this video, to leave a comment below, which really helps us out and enables us to spread the love of tweed jackets all over the internet. So the Alfa Romeo 90 is a car that really doesn't, on the surface, serve much of a purpose. In the early 1980s, Alfa Romeo were in a bit of trouble, really, as they frequently are, and they had a lot of cars which were aging quickly, and they needed to replace them on a very tight budget. The Italian state, who actually owned the company at the time, decided that the best thing to do was to rebody an Alfetta, which had been introduced all the way back in 1972, and actually replace the Alfa 6, which was basically an enlarged Alfetta with the Busso V6 engine and some others as well, and to call it the Alfa 90. They got Bertoni to design the car, which looks actually really handsome. It's not a beautiful car, but I think it is very handsome, particularly from the back. And they put in a range of Alfa Twin Cam and Busso V6 engines. This is the 2.5 litre Busso, which generates 155 horsepower, and the gold cloverleaf with this engine was the only Alfa 90 available in the United Kingdom. There are less than 10 of these actually left in the country. This is the only one currently legal for road use, and mechanically it's actually in really good condition. The gearbox is not in the usual place on a car. It's actually at the back on what's called a transaxle, which is an Alfa Romeo designed thing, and it is the strangest gearbox I've ever used in my life. It's really mushy, and sometimes first gear doesn't even want to engage, it just sort of pops out. I've been told by Mr. Coleman that this is very expensive to replace. It's about £10,000 if I mess up the gear changing of this car, which you know, is not the best really. So I'm being very careful. It is a little bit sort of tricky because it is the spongiest feeling gearbox you could ever imagine, similar to a Mark II Granada, and of course a lot of you would have seen the Mark II Granada review on the channel. That's also a car which is owned by Mr. Coleman, and he really keeps his cars in excellent condition. the car is susceptible to driveline shunt, and I have to be very, very careful in this car that I don't get driveline shunt, because then it makes him unhappy. So you can see in the back, he's so far got a big smile on his face. Mr. Coleman is actually an instructor and professional driver, and he has got more driving qualifications than I used to learn Russian irregular verbs when I was at school. So he's about the most qualified person to assess my driving, and he sometimes gives me funny comments about it, but never mind. Anyway, back to the Alfa 90. The basic engine available in other markets, obviously the Gold Cloverleaf 2.5 was the only one available in this country, was a 1.8 litre with 120 horsepower. Then there was a 2-litre version of that same engine, a 4-cylinder Alfa Romeo twin cam, 126 horsepower. That was available both with fuel injection and twin Dell'Orto carburetors. Then for the Italian market only, there was a 2-litre V6. That was towards the end of production. That developed 130 horsepower. Then, of course, there was this 2.5-litre V6 engine. And there was a VM Motori 2.4 diesel. But as I've been saying for well over 2 years, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. The trim levels in an Alfa 90 are quite difficult to actually work out what they were. I know that there was a Super, particularly in the Italian market towards the end. There was a facelift in 1986, but we never got that in this country. We just got the Gold Cloverleaf in 84 and 85. This is a 1985 car. We never got that mild facelift. The other trim levels I'm not entirely sure, and I do apologise. Maybe when Mr. Richardson does his video as well, because he will also be filming this car once I finish driving it. I kind of, even though it's a bit difficult to drive, I don't, in a sense, want to give it back. I'm quite enjoying this. The driving position is absolutely really terrible though. It's typical sort of Italian one where you need really short legs and really long arms, and I have comparatively long legs and very short arms, so I am really struggling to drive this in some ways. But I mean, once you've got some Busso action, then clearly your cares will sort of melt away. The handling of this car is absolutely superb. It's just brilliant. The suspension setup in this car is similar to a GT-V6, like the one used in Octopussy, and it just feels really well balanced. The steering has a variable power assistance in it. It's one of the first cars ever to be fitted with variable assistance power steering, and it feels really wonderful and direct. And yesterday when I was having a practice drive of this car, because I've had a practice, because you do actually need that if you're a bad driver like I am, I went round a roundabout like we are just about to do now, and I was amazed how the steering suddenly self-centered on me, and it sort of, the weight of it changed, which took me by surprise actually. I can imagine though, if you're the right kind of shape, you're the sort of Italian shape to drive this car, it would be just absolutely fantastic. And once you're used to this gear change, it'll be even better. The car also has lots and lots of weird things on the interior, and you know, Alfa Romeo is not a company that's, you know, averse to making things weird. So we'll be taking a look at that a little bit. But one of the things I really love just about these Alfa Romeos and their sort of crazy model ranges and things like that is that they're always unique and distinctive. The 164 had that funny interior where everything kind of looked sort of the same. The Giulietta had that sort of weird styling to it. And then later the 75, which is very similar underneath to one of these, that was really quite something too. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to drive this car. You know, it's the only one I think I'll ever drive in my entire life. And I actually really like it, but I sort of hate it at the same time too. We'll come back to that in a bit. now I actually have survived the test drive without killing myself and Mr. Coleman and without breaking the car. What can I tell you about it? Well, this is probably the maddest car I've ever driven. I've driven all sorts of things, E-Types, Ford Capris, Minis, but this is the one that's going to beat them all. Anyway, let's take a look now at the Alfa 90's more practical side and have a look in the boot. Which of course means I have to pull this lever down here. You walk round to the rear of the car, taking in these wonderful Speedline alloy wheels. I really like the back end of this car. I'm not going to push this boot all the way down because I don't have to go back and open it again. That, by the way, is the only way to open a boot on an Alfa 90. You can clearly see they didn't move the driver's seat from right left to drive. They just kept the same seat from left-hand drive because the pull is on the left. It's a very handsome car. This sort of full-width light bar at the bottom is really nice. It's typical kind of mid-1980s design, very blocky and square. But considering this is just a reclothed Alfetta, I think this is a really nice car. Obviously, this is the 2.5 Gold Cloverleaf. The boot's pretty big. The spare wheel's actually on this side here. I'm not going to move any of the stuff in here because it will just take a bit too long. These boot sort of springs in here will be replaced, by the way. We can also see the original supplying dealer from Birmingham in 1985, who the dealer principal presumably was called Mario Deliotti. And original dealer plates on this car too. It's not the tallest of boots, and there is no folding or anything like that, and the sort of jack lives at the back in a sort of slightly awkward way, and of course this being an Alfa Romeo, you probably will need to know where that is. But I think it's a lot bigger than I was expecting, considering this car is narrower than a Ford Capri, and I think it's shorter than a Renault 45 V6. I spent a good while recently filming a lot of older cars, and a lot of them have really poor rear seat room. When you first look at the back of this car, you think that's going to be the case as well. It's not, you know, the longest car, and the seats are quite large for something from 1985, but actually it's really comfortable in here. It's like sitting in an Italian armchair. It's actually like sitting in an Italian club class aeroplane, because here are the rear window switches, and there are spot lamps in here as well. I keep expecting this panel to come down and my oxygen mask will deploy. That's how wonderful it is. And also we've got the aircraft style handbrake in here too. Somebody at Alfa Romeo must have worked in the aerospace industry or something like that. Anyway, other weird details, we've got these enormous, massive locking knobs on the doors. I've never seen anything as large as this. Also, the way to get out of this car is a tiny little thing down here. So you don't really need such a big locking knob. What you need is a big door handle to get out. But of course, this is an Alfa Romeo, and so it's the other way around. Also, somebody's actually zipped up the map pockets on the rear of the seats, which I've never seen before in my life. But at least it you know, keeps the car really tidy. Also, we've got a rear cigarette lighter in here, which I think is pretty advanced in 1985. It's obviously much more useful now in the era of smartphones and iPads. There is a rear armrest in here. It's a bit stiff to get out. I'll just manage that. There we go. And that's also comfortable. It's really nice. It's like sitting in the foyer of an Italian hotel in Milan or something. The rear headroom, I've just about got enough room at 5'11". My knees are just about here, but it's a nice comfortable position actually here. And the seat is more akin to, you know, what you design for a limousine, but of course this isn't a limousine. This is really like a sports saloon, I would say. So don't know why it's like this, but I like it. Again, using the weird door handles on the outside to get in. This interior is unlike anything I've ever seen in any other car. Everything is really weird. Everything is not where you'd expect it, and at the same time it's fantastic. I'm actually going to start with the secret mission documents, because they're not where you think that they are. They're actually in here. This special Alfa Romeo 90 briefcase, which is part of the glove box. It's not very safe, because if you actually were to brake in an emergency, this would go straight into the front passenger's face. But these briefcases sell for crazy money if you actually ever can actually find one that's separate from the car. So you press this button in here, open up, and look! My secret mission documents are already in my case. This is undoubtedly the perfect car for spy work. We found it, viewers. And we're never, never, never going to beat that. Another aircraft-inspired detail I've already mentioned is this handbrake lever. If I just put my foot on the brakes, we don't roll anywhere. But I release it, you can see that actually, to release it all the way down, it goes underneath the seat squab. So if you are the most rotund person to drive an Alfa, then you might not be able to get that down all the way. So just carefully put that back up. As I mentioned in the driving section of the review, 5-speed manual gearbox, but on a transaxle at the back, so it has the weirdest kind of feeling shift I think I've ever had. I've actually had this happen when Mr. Coleman was driving, but it popped out of gear when he was driving, and it's really used to wrong slot it, and I've seen him do that as well. So, you know, when I was driving, of course, you know, those things also happen, but, you know, as I've said, I'm not the best driver in the world, so it is liable to happen. One weird thing as well is that all these buttons, which are the hazard light switch, the rear heated window, and both the fog lights and the trip computer, have less prominence on the dashboard than the ashtray. The ashtray is absolutely enormous. You think you really want a big, obvious hazard light switch because it's an Alfa Romeo, so you're going to need it, and yet it's here. With the 164 that came later, they actually put this to the nth degree when virtually all the buttons on the dashboard were the same size and colour. Obviously somebody really thought it was a great design, but practically this is terrible. You also note that in this car there is no radio because the radio was an option and the original owner did not specify it. When he went to see Mr. Mario Delotti at the dealership, he didn't buy a radio and it's still not here. Instead, we've got a blanking hole, and just here, these are the electric seat switches, because this car does have electrically adjustable seats, which is wonderful. And another cigarette lighter, of course, because, you know, you need to be an Italian, and so you need to have some cigarettes. But we get to the actual instruments, which on this 2.5 litre V6 Gold Cloverleaf car, we have the digital instruments which light up like nothing I've ever seen before. This car has got 2 speedometers and actually a little lever here. You move it from one side to the other, you actually see the speed in miles per hour and kilometers an hour just by pushing this switch. This digital speed at the top is very accurate. The strip one here is not so much. But it does look like something like the kit from Knight Rider or the Vauxhall Astra GTE or whatever other 80s car you want to compare it to. The fuel gauge is interesting because the car doesn't do very good fuel economy anyway. You're lucky to get 20 miles per gallon, and also it's a very small tank, so you'd be filling up about every 150 miles or something. And you know, if you were a spy, you'd be filling up even quicker because you'd be involved in illegal espionage. So he'd be going a bit faster than that. The warning lights are all hidden by the rim of the steering wheel. We've got 2 panels here, one down here and one up here, and they're both hidden by the steering wheel if you've got your hand on there, which is completely stupid. This car's only done 65,000 miles from new, which is brilliant, but this is a bit of a project car. You might have seen there's 1 or 2 imperfections on the car because of the steel that they used in the 1980s was the same as the Alfa Sud, and you know, it's a well-documented example of Italian quality. So yeah, there's 1 or 2 bits to do, but the interior is actually very nice. These holes are from an old mobile phone that was in the car, by the way. The ventilation controls in the car are actually really rather conventional. I was expecting them to be sort of octagonal shaped or something, but they're not. They're entirely conventional and a model of clarity. However, the car does have 6 air vents for really no discernible reason, so it truly is an Alfa Romeo. Again, the switches are not where you'd expect them to be. The electric window switches, and this is a Gold Cloverleaf at 2.5, so we've got real electric windows in this car. They're actually up here, and the front ones are here. The switch here is for the passenger side electric mirror. The driver's side is a manual adjustment, which actually makes perfect sense because, you know, you don't really need electric mirror for the driver, really. You can just adjust it here, whereas a passenger, it's good to have electric adjustment. The car feels quite narrow and like a sports car because it is narrower than a Capri. So if you've got a passenger in here, it does really feel like you're sort of quite hemmed in. The Alcantara roofline is very, very nice. And also up here, we've got the strangest interior lights I think I've ever seen. If you press these buttons here, you start to work out what's going on, and the interior lights are actually green, and you can have 1, 2 or 3 green interior lights at the top for reasons best known to I don't know, somebody who was, you know, working on the set of an Alien film. I'm not sure. The door card other than that is really plain. The little tiny lever here is just for opening the door and closing it. Obviously, you know, you've got to get used to the fact that the switches are not here where you expect them to be. The visibility is okay, but the thing is, I'm sitting rather high up in this seat, and this is as low as it goes. So if you're only taller than me, you are going to struggle in this car, particularly because of this overhead centre console here, which robs even more of the headroom. But I can't really criticise this car because you're not really going to be able to buy one. You're not going to be able to drive one on the road because this is the only one that you can, and Mr. Coleman's very protective of his car, which I'm very grateful for him to let me drive it today. But it's just so utterly random and strange that I kind of love it. More really random strangeness is this centre console. Because of the fact we've got this aircraft style handbrake, it actually opens like this, and if you want to, you can actually put a phone in it. It fits exactly like that. So it is actually quite well designed. It's quite amazing. The normal glove box though, separate from the secret mission briefcase, you have pushed this little button here, and you know, in 1985 that might have sprung open properly, but now it's 35 years later, and oh dear. Yeah, it's not broken, by the way. And also, just so you know, this car's had the fog light covers removed. It looks far better with the fog light covers removed, but they are still in there. There is no way I'm going to get my secret mission documents in there, so I'm not even going to try. The final strange item on this car is this light stalk. Now, they look quite elegant. They're quite sort of thin, typical sort of 80s style of these things. So we go to the lights on position. That looks pretty normal. It's like a Peugeot 205 doing that. However, if you want to get the main beam on, you actually have to press that in like that, and then to get it off, you press it again like that. There is no reason for that whatsoever. In conclusion, then, what do I think of the Alfa Romeo 90? Well, I don't think any of you are probably going to be able to drive any of them in this country, at least, unless you know Mr. Coleman very well. So this is probably a bit of an academic question, but should you, by some chance, get your hand on one of these, well, it's a perfect car for spy work. As well as that, it is possibly the craziest thing on 4 wheels I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm surprised the tyres aren't square. Oh, excuse me. I'm terribly sorry. That girl didn't know one end of a rifle from another. Go ahead. If M fires me, I'll thank him for it. So why was it you wanted to buy an Alfa 90?
I just fancied something that was completely out of the box, completely, you know, unconventional, and I fancied a challenge.
So you've owned this car now for a few weeks.
Yeah.
What's it like to live with one of these?
Awkward. Bits are next to non-existent. It's just a joy of owning it. You know, the bits are out there, and it is a restoration project. It's going to be a long-term restoration project. I've been after an Alfa 90 since I was about 15 years of age, and yeah, it's going to be a nice project that's going to stay on the fleet for many, many years.
So we can expect to see many more videos of this car on your channel?
Yes, hopefully, and when the time permits, and there'll be some restoration videos, there'll be some engine work, we're going to do some bits and bobs with the brakes, we're going to be doing some stuff with the exhaust at the back, because it needs looking at, and yeah, so stay tuned.
Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. My name is Joseph Lloyd, and I find cars for people on a professional basis. To find out more, please visit my website or my Facebook page. Links are in the description below. Thank you.